Hi, it's me, Doc Jenna, and I wanted to come to you today and have a little conversation about parenting during this pandemic. Specifically, I want to talk to you about the racism that is hiding in your children's online games. So, if you're like many parents, you are in a situation where your children are watching a lot more. Probably television and maybe spending a lot more screen time than you'd like. I think that it's a lot easier to monitor and control when your children are much younger. I have a new teenager, and I've got 20 something adult children who are no longer in the house. But I've got a young teenager in the house, and I am really grateful that my relationship with my daughter and the work that I do is such that we have open conversations around things like race and racism and sexism and transphobia and things like that. So she's got language for these things that kids aren't often empowered with. And I'm glad to see that increasingly kids are being empowered with this language either through their peers, but certainly hopefully through their parents. So, the first thing I would say is don't forget that when you are parenting, you can't assume that your kids are going to just get good information about race, about racism, around things like that, around identity hierarchies. If you're not sharing with them your values, and I'm not here to make a values judgment for you, if you're not telling your children exactly what is good and what is bad, and at least sharing your worldview, because good and bad are relative depending on who you are and what you believe. But if you don't share what you believe to be a good set of values explicitly, verbally with your children, they're going to run into the default in this world. Certainly in the United States, the default code for the United States is one that privileges some identities over other, that encourages the mistreatment and sort of derision of people who are different, and that's not okay. From my and the perspective of my worldview, everyone should be honored, everyone should be loved, everyone should be respected. So if you're not having these conversations with your kids, and it is worth having these conversations with them young. I actually just started a storytelling series on this channel, on the playlist that is Storytime with Doc Jana, to introduce children to diversity themed books with representation, because it's never too early to have conversations with your kids about race and racism, about identity hierarchies, about discrimination. You just do it at an age appropriate level, right? You scaffold that conversation. So anyway, wanted to get back to what I'm seeing in these online games. So if you are familiar with the RPGs or the role playing games, multiplayer games, online games, if you have settings for your children on their devices where they can't interact with other people at all, they can't see what people say, they can't talk to people who are not them, then that would be that's a good limitation that creates a boundary, because the truth is, cell phones, wired devices, and online gaming, all kinds of different platforms and portals create information highways into your child's bedroom. So you should be, I've actually written an article about this before, you need to be monitoring your children's their devices. You need to be doing spot checks periodically, making sure that the conversations that they're having on their text messages are appropriate. Kids don't have the same kind of boundaries that adults do, and they don't have the experience or the context to know that sometimes making fun of somebody in a certain way could cause them great harm, because you don't know what people are going through. So we need to make sure that we're still being strong and mindful and intentional parents around these devices. I know we're in a pandemic, but what I learned is that there's a particular game called Roblox. Sorry to shout it out, but it's a lot of kids are playing it, and Roblox isn't the cause of the problem, but it is the vehicle, the platform on which people are doing this. Now, I've talked to a bunch of my adult gamer friends, professionals and engineers, and my adult son is just congratulations, Seth. He just graduated from VCU with a computer science degree, and he's been a gamer for a very long time. And I talked to him. I was actually going to write this in an article on Medium, but I've just got way too much going on, so I just decided to talk to you. But essentially, gaming racism is built into gaming because people are built into gaming, quite frankly. And the reality is that you might have really great boundaries and really great lessons and things that you've shared with your children, values, and that can be really good. But what you have to understand is if you're allowing things like unfettered access to RPGs, then you have to realize that the good and the just and fair and kind child or children that you're raising are being exposed to racist ideas, to sexist ideas, to problematic value structures that have nothing to do with the way that you want your child raised. So we like to, as parents, sometimes think of ourselves as shielding our children from the reality of the world. We like to think of ourselves as preserving their innocence. One of the reasons I hear particularly a lot of white parents don't want to have conversations about race and racism and slavery with their children is because they want them to be innocent. I don't want to burden them with that. Listen, America's already going to burden your kid with that, right? So they're going to get the narrative from other people and from society at large, from our systems and our structures, and the dominant narratives of our time are racist narratives, right? They are racist, they are elitist, they are problematic on so many levels. So you have to be open with your kids about what you believe to be good and true, okay? Even if you disagree with me, I'd rather you talk to your children and actually share your values than just let the default be, oh, and most children are going to grow up harboring racist ideas because that's what mother culture dominates. So be mindful. And so, so my kid was online playing the game. They've got little jobs built in. And I remember what was the first one that she said to me. So she's working and they have like jobs that it's really quite fascinating. You can take training for and whatever. And so she works in like a little coffee shop and had to learn all these recipes and actually interacts with people, where you'd think in the game that if you went and ordered a coffee that it would be a bot, right? That it would be an automated AI thing, a program that got you your thing. No, it's actual people who are staffing these different things, which is quite clever. But somebody said to her, because, the interesting thing about the internet, and we saw this, way back in the early days of Twitter, was when you don't have to broadcast your race, a lot of people choose not to because it is such an incredibly strong variable that shapes the kind of experiences that you get to have. That shedding your race can be liberating to see how differently people treat you and how there's a much more neutral and less biased response. So my child happens to be incredibly proud of her race. She does not have any desire or need to hide it. Now, I'm not dragging anybody who chooses not to do that. I'm thrilled that my child has made that choice because she doesn't feel bad about who she is. But choosing a Black character within the game makes her a target for racist comments. So somebody said, I want black tea, like the slaves picking on the plantation, picking cotton. They've asked, said things like, can I have a dog? Yeah, I want to eat a dog because I'm Asian. Just lots of examples of I'm not talking about subtle, I'm not talking about my fourth book, Subtle Acts of Exclusion, How to Understand, Identify, and Stop Microaggressions. These are not microaggressions. There are children online all day, every day, and adults. There are adults doing it too. Please don't get me wrong, but I'm saying what you probably didn't realize is that by allowing your children to be on these games, play on these games, that they are being exposed to racist rhetoric all the time. So have a conversation with your kids about whether they've heard anybody do that. How do they respond to that? Or do you say things like that to people? Do you feel like it's okay? Like, have an open conversation with your children. And so a great friend of mine told me that multiplayer games provide unmoderated, anonymous access for kids to spew hate because they can. Everything from sexism to homophobic slurs, overt racism runs rampant online. Interestingly, gaming platforms have created better moderation tools than Facebook and Twitter. So Twitch, for instance, right? So people are streaming live on Twitch. They're a family-friendly live streaming platform that allows users to broadcast their gameplay. Advertisers don't want to be tied to brands that are streaming vulgarities and hate. So people can flag things that folks say that are inappropriate. They can report them, and the systems can demonetize an individual player's channels if they're saying and doing things that are inappropriate. So, show me the money, right? This isn't the case with games that aren't being broadcasted and recorded. So while, credit to Roblox, you can report, like as an employee in the different little shops, you can report people, you can, say things or whatever, but what she's noticed is that the response doesn't seem to be particularly profound, particularly quick. There's no pausing. There's no your game times out because you've been flagged. I know people would abuse it, and it's got to be a difficult, nut to crack. It's got to be a difficult challenge to deal with. But allowing it to happen and not responding to it is really irresponsible. And as parents, we are trusting that, when we put our kids in what seems to be an age appropriate environment, that it would be safe. So definitely be thoughtful about that. So the gamer community's created a subculture that doesn't have advertising, and so it's like a hermetically sealed culture where the only way to win is to play the game well. So there are other, there are gaming cultures that are positive. There are people who are willing to call folks out, certainly report people, but my concern here, my focus here is on children, right? So I don't want my children taking racism 101 on these interwebs. Like, I'm here for digital school and all that, but you might not have realized that racism was what your kids were signing up for in the context of their games. So be mindful, have an open conversation with your kids, and be well. And thank you so much for liking, sharing, and subscribing to my channel. I really appreciate if you subscribe. You'll know when I upload, and it does help the channel. So thank you so much. Take care.